Hey everyone, this is Zach Ditmarsh for FishTalk magazine. Thanks for tuning in to this evening's Live with Lenny. In Maryland and Potomac waters, trophy rockfish season is on. In Virginia's portion of the bay, stripers remain closed until May 16th, when slotfish only can be taken. Are you ready to open up a serious can of worms? On this episode of Live with Lenny, we're going to talk about trophy season in the Chesapeake Bay. We're going to try to keep fireworks minimal while discussing the positive and negative sides of this much-debated fishery, while including plenty of tips on how you can enjoy success while participating in it. We also have a very special guest joining us, so stay tuned.
This episode of Live with Lenny is presented by Suzuki Marine. To find your Chesapeake Bay and Mid-Atlantic Suzuki dealer, visit fishtalkmag.com/Suzuki.
Hey, Lenny, what's happening?
Ooh, was that like Chat GPT or something talking there?
I don't know, something like that.
Wow, that was it. That caught me by surprise. I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, that's actually that's your boat.
That is, which has a DF300 on the transom, and it does get up and go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone for joining us. Thanks for being here, Lenny, and thanks for Suzuki for sponsoring another episode of Live with Lenny. We're gonna get their little guy up there, so that's gonna be with us for the evening. And you got a very special guest this evening, don't you?
I do. Before we bring him on, I do want to just mention, as everybody knows, particularly these last few days, there's all kinds of stuff flying around on Facebook. There's all kinds of misinformation, disinformation floating around everywhere. People, please, first off, ignore everything you see on Facebook. Just flat out ignore it, unless it's from a source that is really trustworthy, which basically means it's not on Facebook. So that's number one. Number two is, this is going to be a contentious discussion tonight. Now, as always, we want your comments. Please type them in. Zach will get them up on the screen. We will answer your questions. We will address the comments, as we always do. But, we got to keep it civil. And I'm going to tell you right now, any comments with profanity, boom, they're being deleted. They're just going away. Anyone who can't maintain some level of politeness, boom, you're going away. It's just, we really want to keep this conversation civil. And so I just want to lay that out right at the start. If Walt says if it's on Facebook, it must be true. A lot of people seem to think that's the case. It's got me scratching my head. But we're going to set the record straight because, as many people have heard, on Tuesday, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission took some action that will directly affect our rock fishery as well as the fishery up and down the coast. Excuse me. And just for the record, we had already announced what today's topic was going to be. We had already set up this Live with Lenny. We'd already programmed it. Zach and I had already worked on it. So it's just an amazing coincidence. But as this happened and so much misinformation, disinformation started flying around, it was like, man, it'd be great if we could get someone who really knows the straight scoop onto the show. And a guy who does is Dave Sikorsky. He is the executive director of CCA Maryland, which is, by the way, people, the lone voice of the recreational fishing community out there speaking for us today in the state of Maryland. And he also happens to be on the ASMFC. Oh, I'm going to say it wrong. Are you a commissioner, Dave?
Yes.
Excellent. So Dave knows what's going on. And Dave also has a propensity for using lots of words that get very confusing. So as we get started tonight, Dave, I want to hit you with some questions, and I'm going to ask you for one-sentence answers, just so we're 1,000% clear, solid, no one gets confused, everybody knows exactly what's going on, okay? And the first question I want to ask you is, what's the ASMFC?
It's the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. There you go.
What
There's the answer.
What does it do?
So it's an interstate body, an interstate compact of states from Maine to Florida, plus the District of Columbia and representation from Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA. And so it's the fisheries experts from all the jurisdictions that come together to collectively manage migratory fish, which share our state waters throughout the year. So it's from inland waters or tidal waters out to 3 miles is the general place they manage as a body.
Wow, that was a long sentence, Dave, but that was good. You kept it to one
Well,
sentence.
I gave you the one sentence to start, but that's a hard one sentence answer.
No, you did it. You did it. So bottom line, fish are migratory. They don't respect state boundaries. So if Maryland has one set of regs and Virginia has a completely different set of regs, things get screwy. So my next one sentence question for you is, what did they do on Tuesday?
So passed an emergency action and initiated an addendum.
And tell me exactly what the emergency action was.
Sure. It is a rarely used tool of the commission, but what it does is changes rules for 180 days. And so this specific action lowers the maximum size limit in recreational fisheries for striped bass to 31 inches. And it excludes the Chesapeake Bay trophy season, which runs through May 15th this year.
Okay, now you just tailed right into my next question. Why did it exclude the Chesapeake Bay trophy season?
So there was no discussion at the board level with why, but I can tell you my reaction when I saw it, because I thought, why? And I think that one, the season was already underway, and it is generally not the business of the commission to reach out to a single state and say, your existing and approved rules, which are happening right now, must be changed right away. So that's an important point I left out of the emergency action. The effective date is July 2nd. So ongoing season, you can't give this what some would call regulatory whiplash to the to the public. If you change the rules on May 3rd or May 2nd for a season that's only another 2 weeks long, you're never going to get the word out in time. So it's largely just going to be ineffective. That's why it was left out.
So that's terrifically interesting. I actually heard a completely different take from someone else who is very knowledgeable on this topic, but is not a commissioner, but is very knowledgeable on this. And his gut reaction was, well, they're trying to protect the 2015 year class, which is the last strong year class, and they're like 31, 32 inches. So the Chesapeake Bay fishery actually isn't even targeting those fish. What's your response?
Right. No, I think there's some truth to that. The maker of the motion, Dr. Mike Armstrong from Massachusetts, who's a longtime career professional at managing fish, he really knows his stuff. He's been talking about his concern about fishing mortality and protecting that year class for quite some time through a series of meetings now. Many at the table have been. So I think that's completely relevant and a big driver behind that 31-inch choice.
So we've got a number of factors really coming into it. Bottom line, the trophy season continues for the next, week and a half? And we'll point out that with the weather we've been having, I don't think there have been a whole lot of fish caught so far. All right, next one sentence question. Okay, now, it was pretty clear that the Chesapeake Bay is affected after trophy season, right? Mm-hmm. It's included in this, in this emergency measure. So do we know what's going to happen with the rest of our season? And if not, do we have any clue when we're going to know what's going to happen with the rest of our season?
So we will know when DNR announces it, because ultimately it's up to them to make sure our rules are compliant with the commission rules. So the commission sets the standard. All the states agree to that, at least the majority of states at the board level. The short answer is May 16th should be the implementation date for the 31-inch maximum if DNR can complete their process. Their process on this one is very simple. It's called just public notice authority. It's a 48-hour notice authority. So they follow a series of publications and steps, and then the new rule is written down in what's called COMAR, our Code of Maryland Regulations. And ultimately, that's the rule. So just like that.
So if I can nutshell it, the likelihood is that when the rockfish season, we get into the regular rockfish season, we will probably be operating under a 19-inch, 231-inch slot. But
Correct.
we don't know for sure until the DNR actually announces it, right?
Correct. And every state will have a different implementation timeline. I think that is also why the July 2nd date was chosen. Ultimately, that's probably a date all states can have stuff in place by. And there was also discussion about the timeline, the 180 days. The board can extend that twice. And so we would do that at a subsequent meeting. I think it's the intention of the board that this regulation stay in place until the 2024 season, when the addendum, the other action I mentioned, that addendum is focused on 2024 regulations that meet our rebuilding goals.
Now, the extensions are only 100 days each, right?
I've seen a couple different things. I can't remember. I know the executive director of the commission did speak to this on the record during the meeting. It won't be long until all the meeting materials are posted online, if they're not already, so folks can actually go back through and listen to all this.
I tried. They're not there yet.
Yeah, it usually takes a couple days. The official meeting wrapped yesterday afternoon, so the staff has a lot of logging and work to do.
So the core of the matter I want to get to, because this is something I've been getting asked about, is what does it mean for 2024 trophies? And I think, you stop me if I'm wrong, the answer is we just don't know yet. Is that
correct?
That's accurate. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, those were my one sentence questions for Dave. So now let me ask you, let's go beyond that. What are you hearing? What do people want to know that they don't know yet? What more is on your mind on this?
So I've heard from a couple people today, why was the commercial fishery left out? I do see there's actually a question regarding the commercial fishery and the emergency action in the chat. The commercial fishery is not impacted. In this case, what triggered this, again, was a series of conversations at meetings with board members concerned about the general trajectory of the stock, concerned about the reproductive challenges that are happening. And ultimately, we went through and did some extra work this year. For the last year, we've asked extra work of the technical advisors to basically set the board up to take swift action in response to an increase in fishing mortality. And so all removals of fish together to be coastwide fishing mortality. The commercial fishery is capped by a quota. That amount of removals of fish does equal a portion of the fishing mortality. But what we saw spike, because we're controlled very differently in the recreational fishery, is recreational catch through the catch estimate systems.
What I'm confused.
So the last piece is the idea being that, so if recreational took off and caught a bunch, commercial did not exceed their quotas, then recreational needs to shift their regs. And we've done so in an emergency to make sure that we don't do that again and overburden the 2015 year class.
Now, what I'm really confused about by all this is I was waiting for this meeting to hear about the shift in commercial catch between states, because that was on the agenda. And this got so blown up and so much was happening that I missed it.
Right.
Was the commercial allocation between states addressed?
Yes. And so ultimately that was done last. It was option E was approved by the vast majority of the board, which gives the board discretion on approving transfers in the future, but only once the biomass is not overfished. So once the spawning stock biomass is above the threshold is the line we don't want to go below in population. So once we get right above that again, we're not overfished. We're rebuilding the fishery to the target, which is the next line up, the next goal. And those two lines actually equate to an estimate of 100% of the 1995 biomass or 125% of the 1995 biomass. And so those are our two goals. We want to get back to 100% of the 1995 biomass, and that will be the threshold. If we achieve the target, it's 125% of the 1995.
Okay,
biomass.
now, did you catch Walt's question before it disappeared? Zach, can we get it back up? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, this emergency action is unique, and it's strictly to control recreational catch that was seen to be higher than we want. This is unique. It's not common. I wouldn't recommend it as a way to manage fisheries long term. We want stability. But in this case, we could see through the data and anecdotal information. I mean, there's a major body of fish anywhere from North Jersey out to Massachusetts that folks are encountering. And while our data is not the best, the reality is the board felt this was necessary. So again, commercial did not go over their quota. Recreational measures allowed us to increase fishing mortality beyond what we thought we should. So we took quick action. And again, in 20, yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank Walt for asking that. And I want to also let everybody know Dave has limited time with us tonight. So if you got a question specifically for him, please type it in now. Let's get it in there before he's got to go, because he's got a couple young ones at home. He's got to take care of them.
Absolutely. Well, and when it comes to the addendum, so addendum 1 was the commercial transfers. Now that's just done until the fishery is above the threshold and it's not overfished. Don't worry about transfer quota. Our next focus is to focus on setting new regulations that will keep our fishing mortality in check. Because right now we just have this emergency, 180 days, because we found out our last regs were not working. So now we're going to have the technical folks through a multi-meeting period put together what's called a plan development team, a PDT. That's a group of folks that will be helping shape the components of the addendum. The technical committee will support the technical calculations and such, because the whole goal is what level of fishing mortality, therefore what regulations are necessary to make sure we stay on target to rebuild this fishery. And more specifically, the board said our non-preferred option is for you to take days away. Our preferred option is to give us a series of slots that will work using the baseline of 28 inches to 35 inches, because that's the current reg prior to the emergency. So that's the reg that didn't work for us. It allowed fishing mortality to go up. So they're going to start with that reg, adjust the barriers or the boundaries of it. You know, a betting man would say they'll probably give us a calculation of what 28 to 31 means for the coastwide fishery. Just
to be perfectly clear, we're talking ocean now. This is not the Chesapeake Bay. That 28
correct.
to 35 slot. Just want to get that out there, because we got a lot of bay anglers.
100%. And ultimately, I got this call today, and I'll say it multiple times. The addendum can impact commercial fishing. It has specifically been tasked by the board to include commercial maximum size. This is something I've believed in for a long time, and Maryland has one of 36 inches. The states or the state of Virginia does not. They're harvesting about just shy of 1 million pounds, or they can harvest just shy of 1 million pounds of really big fish in the spring. And so it's my goal in addendum 2 to focus on what kind of savings we can get by limiting that impact on the spawning stock. You know, it makes no sense to anybody that we're killing a pre-spawn fish with a gill net. Just like many people argue about the trophy season and whether it makes sense, even though the fish may have spawned, you're still killing a 20 to 30-year-old fish that's really important to the biomass. So in the end, all these measures are to try and conserve what's growing into the biomass population, the spawning stock population, and that's fish over 28 inches, 7 years of age. And also there's a whole other train on the tracks, and that's related to the lack of recruitment in the Chesapeake Bay. That's baby rockfish being observed as being born and growing up and coming into our fishery, accessible to anglers. So that's my bigger concern than exactly what's happening out on the coast. But, for anybody that's belly aching about this really small limit, it is tough. I get that. I respect that feeling. But we're going to be happy that these fish are conserved, because they'll be out there a lot longer and have a lot more chances at spawning.
Well, let me ask you a question you're going to absolutely hate, but I want to ask it because I'm curious. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that as the addendum comes through, let's just say trophy season goes away. Okay.
Mhm.
Just for the sake of argument.
Mhm.
Does that mean that the state of Maryland gets more fish in other ways? Like, could we potentially get half of April with one fish at 19 inches? Say, just as an
So
example.
we're not in a position to use conservation equivalency until the stock is not overfished.
Ah,
And so what you're asking about being creative, trying to trade one thing for another, to me makes total sense. And but it does lead to uncertainty. It does lead to kind of special scheming of the system like we have right now, where some people get one fish, some people get two. I will get back to that and how that is affected short term. But ultimately, well, let me just mention that now. I lost my train of thought. It's been a long day.
please do.
I see it in the questions. So charter boats that have the FACT system, whose clients can keep two fish, those fish will be affected by the maximum size. So it will be 19 to 31, but only one of those fish can be over 28. So that's pretty common. That's normal. We're used to that. When we had a all around two fish limit, only one could be over 28. And that's partly, Lenny, to that speaks to just like what segment of the population we are potentially taking our fish from as Marylanders. And then all that correlates back up into a total fishing mortality rate. So in the end, we technically in Maryland are fishing in an equivalent fashion from a fishing mortality standpoint with our weird regs, different rules for different people. That's technically equivalent to one fish at 18 for everybody. And the same seasons as 2017, as far as the calendar is concerned. That's what's called our fisheries management plan standard. That is the Bay regulation. The one on the coast that mirrors it is 28 to 35 inches, less than
Now,
35 inches.
I'm not a
That's
math
history.
guy. I'm really bad at math. Like, it almost sunk me at one time in my life, right? But I gotta say, there's gotta be some really creative math going on in there to make one fish at 19 for us, two fish at 19 for them, all that shake out to one fish at 18. That's some very interesting math. That kind of blows my mind. But let me ask you about one other thing. Unless, Zach, if we got viewer questions waiting to come up, throw them up. But I do have one other question here, and that is on the recreational. I'm going to use the wrong terminology. Overfishing from 2022. What data are we using to figure on that overage?
So that's MRIP data and any other. That's the Marine Recreational Information Program. And so that's folks that would meet you at the dock, ask you a question, or the survey you might get in the mail. It's called the effort survey. And so it's basically an estimate of catch and effort across the coast year long. It's broken down into 6 2-month periods. And that data is all compiled to understand how many fish we interact with. It does help guide our assumptions about the scale of the stock of fish, the population. It's known that this data is more accurate when looked at a year-long coast-wide level, and then multiple years to try and help us understand the trend of the fishery population. But ultimately, some would argue, and I'm kind of on the fence here. I did support the emergency action, but I think it's fair to argue that we should really don't. Maybe we didn't have to take the emergency action from a data perspective, because there's got to be some balance between the errors in the data, the reality that some states are going to have access to these fish when other states don't. And that's, a complicated part of fish politics and human experience. Like when somebody else has something and the other group doesn't, you automatically create a conflict. I think about that a lot, and I think about what's fair, and how one state should be affected versus another, and whether this data is acceptable. And so, I could rant for hours about data, and in the end, we never have enough. It's not. I don't advise comparing one source of data to another or one sector's data to another. That happens all the time, and that is the politics of fish. Rec versus commercial, for hire versus private angler. In the end, we should all want the best science available and try and support that. And I think, unfortunately, our state agencies just fall short of putting together systems that can supplement the MRIP system. And you don't have to look very far to find a story about MRIP being used wrong and doubt being sown across the rec fishing community. Doubt that I have, and I hope other managers around the table have, because in the end, we're in a fortunate position where we do have some flexibility. We think on our own. We get creative. We don't have to just do exactly what the MRIP system tells us to do. And so moving forward here, it's going to be a major focus of mine. And I think everybody should recognize that we have to find balance amongst the recreational community about who can access what. I don't like to break people down into different categories like harvester versus catch and release anglers, because I think it's ignorant. We're all anglers, and why can't we just stick with that? We are all the public. That's who owns this resource. So, in the time that I'm at the table, I'm going to continue to try and focus on what's best for the fish first, not a little special interest group of people, which means better data and erring on the side of caution.
Well, I can't let it go without just saying, you're going to hate me again, but MRIP data is in many cases, let's say, highly suspect. I have trouble trusting it. I have a lot of trouble trusting it because it's actually really easy to poke holes in it. Now, that said, I was hearing all last summer about the great striper fishing in New Jersey and New York. So you mentioned anecdotal evidence as well. I'm sure that's the category that falls into. But, a lot of fish were getting caught. Now, interestingly, and I'll be really curious to see your response to this, a lot of guys believe that there are more fish out there than we think there are, and that the fact that they had a great bite off New Jersey, New York is actually arguing that there's a whole lot more fish than we think there are, and there's not as big a problem as we think we are. Same argument goes to the fish being in the bay this winter, which I'm not making this argument. I'm just saying I hear this argument, okay? Because I've been, through the years, I've seen winters where the bay's been chock full of rockfish, and I've seen winters where there hadn't been a damn rockfish anywhere in the bay. It goes both ways. They do different things. I should say migratory because the residents are always here, but it goes both ways depending on basically the weather. There were years when they all went to North Carolina. There were years when they all came in the bay and just hung out. So I don't think we can use that as an accurate measure. I don't want to make that argument, but we hear that argument, right?
Yeah. And that's why there's so many different sources of data for a assessment of a population like this. I'd recommend folks go to the Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission website. It's asmfc.org. There's more information on there than you can imagine that'll make your head spin. The reality is this isn't just an exercise in paper. I mean, the folks that do this technical work have a lot of experience, but it is just a scientific-based perspective. The anecdotal information weighs in a lot on this, and we can never tell what next March is going to look like based on what this past March was like in Eastern Bay. I mean, there was an insane bite. And what's funny is in the typical politics of fish, I heard from people who were saying, what the heck? Why are we letting people catch 75 fish a day on a boat and throwing them on the deck when they haven't even spawned yet? And it's like, here we go again. It just so happens that kind of thing is coming from people that are getting their boat ready for trophy season. So there's always going to be this push and pull. But the reality is it's tough to you're never going to convince somebody that saw something with their own eyes that things are different. Right. And that's an unfortunate challenge with fishing, because we go out to try and catch fish. If we go out on a day where we don't see them, let's just say they're breaking rockfish. They never come to the surface where we're fishing. And that keeps happening to us. Guess what? We're going to think the population's down. If we got a hot tip from our friend, or we got lucky, or we're more skilled and we've got side scan and we're able to find the fish, you're automatically going to have this bias that you think the fishing's better than it maybe is. And so ultimately, that's why science is involved. It's to take all this other information and try and compile it. And as fishery managers, we're taught to understand all these sources of information and try and make the most objective choice possible, yet plenty of what we do is subjective, right? Yeah. And that's life.
Now, so we're hitting our time limit, but before I let you go, I saw a question come and go real quick, Zach, and I didn't catch it. If it was one specifically for Dave, can we get it back before he goes? Aha. What is the most abundant size fish to take from if people are taking fish home? Which stock year has a better stock?
Gotcha. Good question. So ultimately, what this kind of relates to is a challenge and why we've had to take this emergency action. There's a highly abundant 2015 year class out there in the water, and those are about 31, 32-inch fish. And because they're abundant, people are more successful, and therefore fishing mortality was higher than we expected. And so that's a year class that's relatively strong. Behind that is, I'm pulling up a chart. It was shared at the meeting. Age 5 fish, the 2018 year class, they're around 24 inches. Age 6 fish, the 2017 year class, they're around 26 inches. And so those were some relatively abundant year classes. Everything since then has been pretty low. There it is. Well, and that's the year class strength. And so you'll see like 2011 was a big year that caused a similar problem in the Chesapeake Bay fishery. We were required to have a 20.5% reduction of mortality, but as soon as the 2011 year class size got into our legal size limit, which is starting in age 3, mostly in age 4, we saw a spike in fishing mortality and everybody's heads exploded. Oh, the wreck fishermen are overfishing. Not really true. We just followed our rules that were set. This time, to all the naysayers of the commission, they're seeing that the commission's taking this seriously this time and recognizing we can't lay back and allow these wreck regs to continue to take too many fish.
And I want to just say, Zach, that was magnificently quick that you got that up there. Good job. But I also want to point out that, the last 4 years have been abysmal. So we got iFishMD coming in here. What's he saying? I got to reach for my glasses. When is the AMFC expected to have data to what needs to be done under Addendum 2 to achieve a 50% chance of rebuilding by 2029? Summer meeting or fall?
So it'll be there should be a draft plan at the summer meeting, the August meeting. The annual meeting in October is where I think that the plan will be released. And then released to the public. A series of public meetings will occur after that. There may be a special meeting added into the schedule that was discussed this past week, but all this will be published very soon, and there will be public meetings. So if you all remember, Addendum 6 are the current rules we're fishing under. That was a similar process, multiple meetings, public meetings in between. I think we extended the Addendum 6 process just a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, but I believe everything can be wrapped up by our late January, early February meeting of 2024, and therefore the regs that we'll consider are likely to be implemented by 2024. I think that's where everybody's head is. The last piece of the puzzle, calendar-wise, is we will see an updated stock assessment in October of 2024. And so we just did that in 22. We're going to see one in 24. And that's kind of the normal operation. Every 2 years, get an update, consider if we need to change the rules, and then create an addendum to change the rules.
Okay,
so,
now, Dave.
Yeah.
I believe
I have to go cook dinner.
Your wife and kids are getting angry. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know we kind of pressed you on this, but I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And folks, Dave has informed me earlier that even though he's going to go cook dinner, he will try and kind of keep an eye on the comments. So if you have questions specifically for him, type them in. Maybe just type, question for Dave or something like that. And I'm sure at some point we'll get an answer for you. Thank you, Dave.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lenny.
Thanks, Dave.
Take care, Zach.
Let's give Dave a round of applause, everybody. What do you think?
Hey.
That was awesome.
All right. Well, Zach, we're going to have to fly through these slides.
I mean, we really like Dave, though, didn't we? You're right.
We're going to be press.
All right. I'm going to slip back behind the curtain and
pop number one up. Let's just roll with it. All right. So this first slide, I put this in the last edition of Fish Talk. You may have seen it. It was with my notes column. I forget the exact size, but it was a plus 40-inch fish. And we killed 3 that day. And Zach, go ahead and bring up the next slide, which is going to explain why. This is the time frame. Look at my hair, people. Look at my hair. I was much younger, and I really didn't understand what was going on. And we kept a lot of really big fish that honestly, I look back and I go, oh my God, I wish I hadn't done that. But we just didn't know any better. Of course, today we do know better, and we got to make some tough choices. We got some decisions to make. So in a moment, Zach's going to go to the next slide. We're going to put up some questions, and we're going to do this kind of like they do with the public comment things. I'm going to have some different options that I want you all to read through, and I want you to vote in the comments. Just tell me what makes the most sense to you, okay? Go ahead, Zach. Let's bring it up. And option number 1, should we end trophy season entirely? Should it just be a done deal? Number 2, should there be a limit on the number of rods you control? I put this one in here because it comes up over and over again. I've heard it from a bazillion people, and I got to say, it is kind of crazy how many lines we strain the water with during trophy season. Number 3, should we have a rigorously limited harvest? And there are a lot of options for that. You know, years ago, when they opened the moratorium, we actually had tags. I don't remember exactly, but I think you got 3 at the beginning of the season when you bought your license. And once you use those up, that was it. You can only keep 3. I'm not saying that's the thing to do now, but, you know, maybe we could have a tag. Maybe people could keep 1 trophy per season, something like that. We could have a boat limit. We could say, you know what, it's 1 per person or 3 per boat or 2 per boat or whatever. That's what we do with cobia. We do it with a number of other fish. So, you know, maybe option 3, we should have a rigorously limited harvest. Or, and I didn't put option 4 for this because I haven't talked to many people who think it should be an option. But, you know, maybe you're out there. Should we just maintain the status quo? Should we just keep things the way they are? All right, so everybody, please go ahead in the comments. Plug in your option that you like the most, or if you think it should be status quo. And Zach is going to compile the results and give us the percentages of what everybody thought later on. And in the meantime, I guess should we leave it up for another second? Where's the elevator music, Zach? I thought we'd have elevator music for this. Thank you. There's the elevator music. So as long as the elevator music is on there, you can read these and vote, but it's going to end very quickly, and we're going to move on because we are already way squeezed on time. All right, type in your comments. All right, let's get the next slide up, Zach. Man, Zach is working tonight. He's just pulling those levers and clicking those buttons. Okay, so this is why I personally don't want to see a complete elimination of the possibility of trophy fishing. The smile on that face. Now, a lot of people say, well, look, if you're going to take a kid like that fishing, this is actually a good learning opportunity, right? To teach him why that fish needs to go back. I agree with that. That's a great point. It is. But there is something about keeping a ginormous fish that gets young people charged up. As you grow older, you kind of don't care so much anymore. Honestly, I'm just as happy to take home a 22-inch fish as anything else. But it's an exciting thing. And I'm just not sure that I want to see that completely go away. Maybe I'm wrong on it. We'll see what you all think. But I kind of hate to see that possibility completely go away. You know, again, maybe, you know, kids under 16 can keep 1 fish ever. I don't know. I'm just saying. I hate to see it completely disappear. All right, go ahead and take us to the next slide, if you would, Zach. And this is a shot from a few years ago. We were on a charter boat, and you can see all the rods in the background. And I'm telling you right now, that's like less than half. We were pulling like 26 lines, 28. Do you remember, Zach, exactly how many?
I think it's 24.
24? I thought it was more than 2 dozen.
It was quite a bit. You're right. It was.
Maybe ever. It was a lot of lines. It was an awful lot.
30. You're right.
Yeah, it was a lot of lines. Now, in freshwater, I believe you're allowed how many?
3 in Maryland.
3. So this isn't freshwater. This is the bay. But 3 to 30-ish is a pretty big jump. It does seem kind of crazy. Now, mind you, if you got, call it 2 dozen, you got 24 lines, 20 of those lines or so have 2 baits on them, right? They got their tandem rigs. So you're actually pulling like 40-something rigs through the water. You're just straining the water in search of that lone fish. I don't know if limiting the number of lines on a boat would do enough to have a serious impact. But it does seem a little absurd, honestly, that we pull this many lines to catch a fish or two. And on this day, we caught 2 trophies and I think 1 throwback, or maybe 2 throwbacks. But it was not like, we caught 30 fish like might have happened, 20 years ago. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide if we would, Zach. This one's going to surprise everybody. Whoa, look at that. It's not even a fish. It's an elk. Why in God's name did I put an elk in Live with Lenny? Here's why. You go out west, you go to states like Colorado, whatever. They've got populations of elk that are strong enough to support a hunt. Now, they're not big populations. They're a couple 100,000. But they're strong enough to support a limited hunt, a limited harvest. And they do lotteries, and they have waiting lists that last for years. And they sell those tags, the right to shoot these fish, for a lot of money. Now, I'm going to draw a little parallel here. Here on the Chesapeake Bay, one thing we didn't get into with Dave, but I strongly believe is that a lack of scientific knowledge is one of the real problems we have trying to manage our fisheries in the Bay. We're stuck with this 9% release mortality rate, which we know is potentially very, 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 very wrong. We know it's much higher in the summer. We know it's much lower in the winter. We know it's much different if you're fishing bait versus lures. We thought the circle hooks were panacea. Well, I'm saying we found out at this point that they are not. You pull up an awful lot of fish, dripping blood, using a circle hook. It happens. You people know that. So I just don't buy that release mortality figure, the use of that figure. And yet we're stuck with it. We have to use it. So we need better science. And perhaps if we had a limited harvest on trophies of some form, we could use that to generate the money to do some scientific study. Last year, the state of Maryland had a budget surplus. The amount of money it dedicated to new studies on rockfish mortality was goose egg. And that's in a year with a budget surplus. So maybe we need to find the way to generate funds to direct towards studies like that so we get a really good scientific handle on exactly what's going on with these fish when we're fishing for them. It's something to think about, right? All right, Zach, let's bring up the next slide, please. And, well.
Oh, I didn't know when you wanted the results.
Wow, they're already, okay, hold off on them for a minute, okay? I want to save them. I want to save them for round 2. Okay, we'll save them. We'll do them together. All right. So this here is a slide from, I can't tell you the exact date. I don't remember, but it's early May. It was trophy season. We had no interest in trying to catch a trophy. So we just went out and threw some jigs and, fun fished, caught and released. And this is just one of the fish we caught. And I put this up here just to point out the end of trophy season or a severely limited harvest trophy season does not necessarily mean we can't go fishing the first 2 weeks of May, or for that matter, the last 2 weeks of April. These fish are out there. They are harder to catch. Yes, they're roving around in pods. They're often suspended on a thermocline. They move a lot. It's not at all as easy as it is to catch them at other times of year, but they're out there. So let's not forget that, fishing on the smaller fish is an option in the early spring too. All right. Now, Zach, how about making a system like FACS available to the average angler? Robert, I was on a advisory committee where we made that exact point. That was what it all boiled down to. We need that app. I don't know that anything has been done with that recommendation, but I can tell you that, there's a new sheriff in town when it comes to the state of Maryland, and the new regime seems to care about some things a whole lot more than the old one did, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. But there is a discussion about that going on. I would say anytime you get the chance to bring that up, like you just did, bring it up. Let's keep it front and center in the conversation. Because a program like that, all we need is an app. We've all got phones. We've all got them on the boat. All we need is an app, and we could really start getting much better catch numbers from the recreational community. So, yeah, keep bringing that one up. All right. Whew. Now, I want to see if there's any kind of change in anyone's thinking. And I want to throw up our questions again. Can you throw them up there, Zach? And let's play the elevator music. And if anybody wants to change their mind, now's your chance. Let us know. And Zach's going to keep track of what everyone thinks, and we're going to get some percentages up here. But this is the opportunity. If thinking about this stuff, yeah, you know what? Maybe, number 1 is a better idea. Maybe number 3 is a better idea. Whatever. Go ahead and punch it in before the elevator music ends. Good gravy. Zach, please make the elevator music end. All right. Stop the elevator music, please. All right. Do we have any changes flowing in?
Not a whole lot.
Okay. Well, what was our initial percentages? What did you say?
Let's see. Oh, that stuff's flying in now. It's flying in. Stand by. We need more elevator music.
Oh God! Please, no more elevator music. I wonder if we can we go to the next one without messing anything up?
What?
We could go to the next slide, and you can jump in after we get through that if you want.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll put that up so if anyone wants to keep voting. There it is there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so how do we increase production? Here's why I ask this. What you hear a lot from the fisheries managers is we have one lever we can pull, and that's reducing harvest. We have the brakes. That's it. There's nothing else we can control. Well, for a fisheries manager, that's true. That is all they can control, right? They can hit the brakes. They can open it back up. That's it. My question is, why don't we learn how to steer the car? Because we're so focused on how many fish we are catching that oftentimes we don't even talk about why we don't have more fish. Why our young of year index is so low. Why the spawning success is so utterly pitiful. Pitiful. Go ahead and pop up the next slide, Zach. You can leave it little there. Just pop it right in. Because water quality has got to be having a massive impact here. The scientific study, the lack thereof that we've been talking about, has a huge impact here. I get so frustrated when I hear people say, hitting the brakes is the only lever we can pull. Well, no, it's not. We can try and improve the water quality. We can work a little harder to press the politicians. We can work a little harder to actually improve the state of the Chesapeake Bay overall. We can work a little harder to get more oysters in the water, filtering it out. We can work a little harder to get better regulations passed regarding construction, regarding runoff. It boggles my mind that we still have people pitching things like indoor salmon farms the size of 3 football stadiums on a Chesapeake tributary. We're still talking about that. I don't want to talk about that. That should never even come up. But that just came up. We've still got gigantic tanks with thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of chicken waste sitting there, waiting to leak. Oh, wait, one just did leak. Which river was that? Was that the Nanticoke or the Marshy Hope? That tank shouldn't have been sitting there. It certainly shouldn't have leaked. There's a lot, an awful lot we can do to improve our water quality. And what we've been doing for the last 20 years is basically treading water, right? Population's been growing. We've managed to let it keep it from getting any worse. That's as good as we've been doing. Everybody listening right now, if you're not already a member of CCA Maryland or Virginia, join, please, for God's sakes. You've heard me say it 20 times already. The amount of money that you spend on it is like 10 gallons of fuel in your tank. It's a couple bags of bloodworms. Get over it. Join. They are our one voice at the table. For that matter, join CBF. You should be joining the Chesapeake Bay Foundation too. You know what? They're not focused on fishing, but they are focused on that water quality thing. And they've had a lot of successes in recent years, particularly in litigation, in stopping really stupid stuff. Not the salmon farm in specific, but stupid stuff like that really just nobody should ever be talking about on the Chesapeake. It just boggles my mind. Zach, before you give me the percentages, I want you to put up the next slide because it's related. Very related. Can anybody guess? So this photograph was taken in the Chesapeake Bay region. And I wonder if anybody can guess where it was taken. And if you saw I made a silly Facebook post on this. If you saw it, don't answer, please. But I wonder if anybody could guess. That is water that beautiful exists in the Chesapeake Bay region. You know where? In the Baltimore Aquarium. That's where. Well, guess what? Once upon a time, the Chesapeake Bay water looked like that. And it may be a long, hard road to get back to something like that. But it really has degraded so far that we can get it a whole lot better than it is in short order. In short order. We saw it getting better 15, 18 years ago. We had improving water quality for a number of years in a row. And then all that kind of got blown away, particularly with the monsoon springs we had. And then the next thing you know, we've got algae blooms on every river on the western shore from, throughout Maryland. I think Virginia probably did a little better with it, but we just had all these horrible algae blooms over and over and over again. Ugh. So let's figure out how to drive the bus instead of just being accustomed to hitting the brakes or the accelerator. All right, Zach, we have percentages? What do we got?
Yeah. So I used my high-tech Suzuki pen, actually. Isn't that funny?
Awesome.
For the first response, I don't know if we got an effective survey sample to decide, make a deciding factor if people change their minds or not. But in the first survey you did in this program, 48% of people have said option 1. The majority of people said that. 21% for option 2, and 30% for option 3. I should mention what those were. Option 1 was ending trophy season. A couple comments on that were people saying that we should have a slot limit for trophy season. Other people said that we should have catch and release trophies only. So that was interesting. And then as far as some of the comments on limiting numbers of rods, some people said 4 rods. Some people said maximum 10 lines. So that's interesting. So 48% opted for ending trophy entirely. 21% had said we should restrict amount of rods, and 30% said we should have a rigorously limited harvest. The second time around, option 1 and option 2 were equal votes, with much less people really commenting on number 2. I should say a lot of people did say they said all 3 of these things should be implemented. There were several people said all 3, and also had listed those as preferences. So that's all in the comments, and that's pretty interesting. So they're saying not one, but all these measures could be effective in reduction.
Did anybody vote for status quo?
They did not. And there's actually an interesting comment from our friend Gary. Thanks for tuning in, Gary. He's frequent. Nothing is ever accomplished when you maintain status quo. I thought that was a great response.
So that, I think, is perhaps one of the most telling things about everything, all the numbers you just gave us, is that not one person said status quo. I think that's really important to bear in mind. I think it's pretty clear, pretty obvious that we need changes. Absolutely. We need changes. All right, so why don't we go ahead and pop up the next slide, unless we got questions out there waiting. If so, feel free to put them up because I don't want to step on the questions with my slides. But,
Actually, this is a question that I had personally in the recent past.
oh, we have a trout stocking program. Why can't we have a striped bass stocking program? That's a great question. It's one that's gone through my head too, and I've meant to ask folks about that, and somehow I never have asked any biologist or fisheries guy who really is in the know about that. I don't know the answer. Dave, if you're out there,
Yeah, I think I know an answer because I did some research.
Ooh, please.
Our striped bass, Marone saxatilis, is a natural, untampered genetics. And the reason I know this is because a hybrid striper, which is a white bass and a striped bass, it somehow jumped a dam down somewhere in Virginia, and they were concerned that it would make its way into the Chesapeake Bay and somehow, integrate within the gene pool and change the stock. So I think that the reason we don't have a stocking program is because it is a natural population.
So we just don't want to mess with it.
Right. We don't want to tamper with something. I mean, it's pure. And I'm not sure if that's right. I hope maybe there's a biologist out there. We certainly know a few, and we could follow up with that. But recently when I heard that story, that's what I ended up with.
That's interesting. So the hybrids are also in Conowingo. And there was a time, I'm going to say I was
above the Conowingo?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a time, I think I was in my 20s, and I'm not sure if they were stocked there or they got there like snakeheads get everywhere. I don't know. But there was a time I was in like my 20s when I caught a rockfish with the big time broken lines. And I wondered if it was, a fish that got away, went through the mill and managed not to get chopped up by all the turbines and ended up in the river. I don't know. Oh, here we go. We got Dave. Okay, Dave's saying it's a matter of scale. We cannot recreate what nature provides. We just have to conserve what we have and do our best to improve the habitat and water quality. Well, that's interesting. If it's a matter of scale, you also have to figure it's probably a matter of priority, right? Because that's all a matter of money. They certainly do it out west with the wild salmon. They mixed in hatchery reared fish. I got to say, I'm not a gigantic fan of the thought of stocking rockfish. Cost, yeah. I'm not a giant fan of the whole concept because I do want that native population to remain untampered with. If it's not already too late for that. I don't know. That's a very interesting one. Very interesting topic.
So Lenny, it was Lake Chesdin, the hybrid striped bass, caused concern because that actually spills into the Chesapeake. So they were concerned that the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources was concerned that it might make its way into the Chesapeake. So
that was recent, wasn't
it? If a hybrid escapes from where they are stocked in our tidal rivers, there's potential for them to back cross with the Chesapeake Bay strain of striped bass, which could pollute the genetic integrity of this valued and treasured fishery. So that's from the Virginia Division of Wildlife Resources.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions to pop up, let's get the next slide up. How are we doing on time here?
We have 1 minute till 7, but I got nowhere to be.
We're gonna run a little. We're gonna run a little over tonight.
All right. Actually, regarding that, hybrids are below the Conowingo. We used to catch
below the dam. Okay. Yeah.
You also heard them hybrids cross. They cannot reproduce, but don't have clarification. Well, nature finds a way. If you've ever seen Jurassic Park, you know.
Yeah. So the DNR is unwilling to fund breeding striped bass due to the results of stocking during the mid to late 80s. Were striped bass stocked during the mid to late 80s? If so, that's a new one to me.
More on that.
Yeah. So this is just, you can even keep that littles up. I just wanted to put this slide up there to make sure that as we discuss the knew that, the studies that we do have that were done here on the bay were done 30 or more years ago. And nowadays we have way better tech. And these are little acoustic tags. Go ahead and pop up the next slide if you would, please, Zach. And these are some of the listening points on the bay. There are 30 in total. This is just showing the main arrays. And basically, the way that it's usually related to people is it's like an easy pass. The fish swims by the array or by the sensor, and it automatically gets the ping. And you see where that fish is and what it's doing. And it really gives you a fantastic way to keep tabs on, A, is a fish still alive? i.e. catch and release mortality can be studied. Where is the fish going? What is it doing? i.e. why are all the fish going up north are all the fish going up north as it appears in the summer? Are they going into places we don't know they're going? Migration patterns. I mean, there are a million things you can study with this. Again, it's all a matter of will. It's all a matter of money. And I'll say it one more time. We had a budget surplus in Maryland last year, and we dedicated nothing to this. And that's not to disparage the DNR scientists. We actually have some really good scientists at the DNR, but they're tasked with a ton of stuff. And this isn't their focus. They've got stuff they're doing constantly. And so we need additional science in addition to what the folks who are on the state staff are constantly doing already. So I saw something fly up there real quick, and then I lost it. And I'm not sure what that was. From Rich. There are a couple by this. Okay. Yep. There's a bunch. I put the 30 in the corner because there's 30 in total. This graphic only shows 3 major arrays. It doesn't show them all, but it was the best graphic I could find on short notice. So that's why I popped that in there. All right. Woo! Somehow we made it through all the slides. We are at the 7:02 moment. We're not going to shut it down. If folks have questions, comments, now's your chance to pop them in. We did make it through all the slides somehow. I don't even know how. But now's the time to get them on there.
And I popped up that David had said yes, and I think he was responding to Kevin's comment about the striped bass stocking in the 80s, and David confirmed that he said yes, they did do that.
So I guess there was. I never knew there was stocking. I did not know they had ever done it. I guess it wasn't terrifically successful in that case.
All right. Well, Lenny, we're kind of waiting to see if anyone has any additional questions. I thought we'd mention that we have the Fish Talk Mag Chesapeake Perspective. If you go to that page right at the top, you'll find a link to the past, present, future of striped bass, which has a great, history of everything. We did a 3-part series in 2022, so definitely check that out.
We should also remind folks of the next perspectives. I got to go to my calendar because I don't know it offhand, but I think it's in the summer, right?
Yes, it's June. I want to say 15th. Let me pull that up.
Oh my God, is it really June 15th? If it is, I don't have it on my calendar.
Yep, June 15th.
June 15th. Holy cow. I'm writing it down
I just sent you the link. Come on. Okay. Hey, Lenny, Matt actually just had a great question that reminded me that there was a whole segment of tonight that we haven't addressed yet.
Uh-oh. What's that?
Tactics and tips. How to fish if you want to participate in this fishery.
Oh my God, you're right. We didn't get into it.
Matt,
where should I fish Saturday to win the boatyard? Okay, so I have a very unfortunate answer for you on where to fish. You're not going to like this, but it's a reality. The wind has been so strong and the weather has been so horrible that, as far as I can tell, very few fish have been caught. There's some larger boats that have been going out, charter boats mostly, and they've been catching some fish. But I got a report today from a guy who trolled after the wind quit. He trolled the Chesapeake Beach zone, I think he said, to the gooses, and never got a bite. We got some reports from guys up near the bridge who trolled tandems, umbrellas, who caught undersized fish, never caught a trophy, and only a handful of that And then at some point, they didn't fish long. At some point, they threw up their hands and said, "This is ridiculous," and went in. I went out opening day. I went out to take out my brothers, not to target trophies, but just to try and, fun fish for smaller fish. And we got to the mouth of the South River, and I looked at each of them, and I was like, "Are we done?" And they were like, "Yep, we're done." We turned right around and went back in. So the intel level is very low. Now, Dylan has not sent in the reports yet, unless they came in while we were on. And so I don't know if he's gathered more on that. But I would tell you, keep an eye on the fishing reports. He does get more intel than I do because he goes out and he digs for it. And he'll probably have some indication, hopefully, on where some folks have been getting them. But the bottom line is intel is really thin. It's really thin. I will say one thing, just on a personal opinion matter. We're very late, very, very late in the spawning. Guys are already catching trophy-sized fish off the beach on acetique. Those are fish that spawned long ago and are leaving. Our coastal correspondent, John Unkert, he caught 3 this morning, just this morning. So there are big numbers of big fish that have already left. So that being the case, it's a Southern Bay. I would say go as far south as you can stand, because the few big fish that are left are probably way down south. And I just want to, on their way out. I just want to point out for folks, in case they don't know, and Zach, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the boatyard has switched to a catch photo format, correct?
Oh, Lenny, the Boatyard Bar and Grill tournament's always been catch and release.
Oh, it's always been catch and release.
20 years. So kudos to them for 20 years of a catch and release.
Okay. So, right. So this is not troll the fish up and kill it. This is take the picture. So, thank you, Boatyard. I didn't realize it always was. I thought they had weigh-ins at one point.
No.
Okay, that's great.
They've been leading the charge for 20 years. Okay.
Excellent.
All right. So Walt's got a question about slot limits on other fisheries. Do they help the redfish?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a magnificent success with redfish, right? Reds were really pounded. They were in dire straits. And they put in the slot limits, and it's been highly effective. Now, I do want to point out, if you go to Louisiana right now and you want to catch an over slot fish, you can. You can. I'm not sure exactly which regulations are where, but you can get permit. You can, buy the permit with the money going back into the fishery to take home an over slot fish. I'm not sure if it's Louisiana you can buy a tag in, or Texas, but one of the, some of the Gulf areas, if you invest in the fishery, you're putting the money towards the science, towards the replenishment, you do get to keep a big fish. So it absolutely helped redfish. And let's just point out, just for the record, the really big fish really don't taste great anyway in comparison to the little fish. The 19, 20-inch rockfish tastes a whole lot better than the 40-incher. So just for the record.
All right. A couple questions from earlier. I think we had some people tuning in and catching up. So we had some more, Jesse chimed in. Option 1, we're still getting.
Okay.
Oh,
thank you, Jesse.
We're still getting some poll answers. So I think we addressed this, but we can
Yeah, that will apply to everybody. It will absolutely apply to charter boats. So that'll be their max. Now, that said, I'm not sure it's going to change a whole heck of a lot. I mean, realistically, how many fish over 31 inches do you catch, or do the charter boats catch, versus those between 19 and 31? I mean, yeah, sure, a few other fish will be released, but I don't think that in particular will have a huge impact on the Chesapeake Bay once we get, certainly once we get out of May, and probably once we get, halfway through May. Oh, man. I can see those jigs behind me. I'm so bummed I didn't get to use them on Monday. I forgot they were back there. I guess it's on that side. Well, do we have any other questions, Zach? Or are we calling time?
I think we're good.
Okay. Well,
comments, but
thank you everybody for tuning in. We do appreciate it. I hope you found tonight interesting and fun. I hope everybody learned something. I did. I learned a couple things, actually. And we want to make sure we thank Suzuki Marine again. Hey, you know what? They built an awesome outboard. You can go look at the multiple boats in my yard right now, and you'll see Suzuki. So, you know, I'm not just saying it because they sponsor Live with Lenny. I'm a true believer. Thank you, Suzuki. Whew, did we cover everything? I think we covered everything. Yes?
I think we did.
Okay.
You know what song I never hear in your boat?
You know, you've never heard that on my boat. But my boat doesn't have an elevator. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.